Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Monday, November the 10th, 2025, and today we are going to discuss landscape fabrics and if they are really so bad, a farming podcast that changed me and many others, plus perennial ryegrass. What a lineup. So let's do it. All right. Happy Monday, everyone. I hope you all are doing well and enjoyed your wonderful weekends. I had a, relatively active weekend myself. Friday, Hannah and I had a date night and went to see the UK Wildcats play some basketball, which is always a good time. We've gone to a game together almost every year of our now almost 14 years of marriage, which is awesome. So that was a good time, always is. This weekend, I also played a lot outside with the kids because honestly, we had some really nice weather until yesterday when the wind brought in some colder temperatures, and it is around like 25 degrees Fahrenheit right now. That's like -4 Celsius with a wind chill in the teens. So like -9 Celsius-ish. Yeah. We even got some snow flurries last night with a chance of more today. So I basically just worked half a day yesterday, winterizing the farm, knowing I would be pretty limited in what I could do today. So maybe even more so in the winter than in the summer, the work days revolve pretty heavily around the weather. Like if I see nothing but frozen tundra in the forecast, next week, I have to just harvest whenever I can leading up to that because harvesting and washing anything is impossible when everything is frozen. So I busted that out this weekend. So I will very likely do somewhat of a half day today, which is fun. Your days off kind of come in pieces, at least for the farm. I mean, this show will be a full show, or maybe I'll just get up and walk out mid-sentence.
Okay, see you later, bye-bye.
All right, so continuing on with our mulch series of segments that we do on Mondays and Tuesdays, today we are going to discuss landscape fabrics. Now, to be clear, I think we should all be moving away from ground cover plastics as much as possible, but I wanted to talk about landscape fabric as a mulch because a lot of people use it, and there are people who have likely already purchased it, and there are not a ton of great alternatives, honestly, out there to accomplish what it does, though maybe some like burlap could be the next good alternative, which I plan to trial next year. So what does it do that's so attractive? Like in a world where someone is listening to or watching this, what does landscape fabric bring that is so hard to replicate? Well, the first thing it does is it suppresses weeds really well. So what you will see a lot of growers do is burn holes, which burning plastic is not great for the environment or your health, but that's how the holes are generally created. So they will burn the holes at specific spacings to plant, say, tomatoes. Then they will shove the tomatoes into the hole with drip tape underneath of the plastic and then not have to cultivate them throughout the season. So it saves you a lot of labor in that sense. The black color also helps warm the soil slightly, but also perhaps surprisingly keeps it relatively moderated in terms of temperature, because the other thing the landscape fabric is doing is keeping the soil moist. So in that way, like other mulches, it does help retain some moisture, suppress weeds, and keep the soil in place. The cons are, well, the plastic, obviously, not just the fact that it will slowly break down into microplastics in the soil over many years, but also that when it's done doing that, it will go to the landfill where it will likewise continue to break down into more and more micro and nanoplastics, potentially before heading to the ocean, the air, and then maybe back into your lungs. So yeah, not great. But the other side of that with plastic mulches is that they are not adding anything to the soil in the same way that compost or straw or hay or whatever other mulch material adds organic matter and nutrients and carbon and all those things to the soil and creates food and habitat for microbes. Landscape fabric will indeed keep the soil moist, which is good for the microbes, but it will not itself feed them. On the one hand, landscape fabric is significantly cheaper than most mulches. On the other hand, it's environmentally more expensive, which clearly is not included in that price. I'm not sure how one accounts for that, really. I think growers sometimes get frustrated with me because of my lack of love for running a business. It's a necessity to run it as a business. It's just not my favorite thing. And I think that things like landscape fabric are kind of what takes some of the romanticism out for me. The businessy thing to do is just use landscape fabric because it's the most cost-effective mulch. It saves labor, which is the biggest expense in most businesses, and it's easy. You just lay it down really quickly. It's light, easy to transport. But there is no line item for how much it costs the environment to use these sorts of materials in a business budget. Not saying you can't run a successful business without it. You absolutely can. Just saying that's why people use it and how it's often, justified. And it was that way even for us in the beginning. It can make you more profitable. So I felt like I needed to at least cover these sorts of mulches because they are pretty common. And I don't think people should feel bad necessarily for using them, especially if they already own them, because especially in the beginning of a farm, they can make a huge difference in getting weeds under control. Things like bindweed and Johnson grass, for instance, can be, at least for a time, suppressed pretty well through the season, thus weakened while you're growing food if you're using these landscape fabrics, where other mulches can't really boast that fact. Oftentimes, if you just use like hay or straw or something, those sorts of perennial weeds may not go away. And in fact, in some cases, they may thrive, which is not great. We still own some landscape fabric, and I will use it for terminating cover crops. And a couple years ago, I even grew some tomatoes in it, though I generally have moved away from landscape fabrics as a method because it limits interplanting and diversity options, plus all the other reasons I listed. And it's just not my favorite aesthetic. I think sometimes the easy answer prevails every time if you don't occasionally challenge yourself to come up with a more responsible solution. I've already done breakdowns of the studies on landscape fabrics and microplastics. Summary, it's not great. How do you all feel about these products? Have you started to move away from them? Are you struggling to move beyond landscape fabric or for specific reasons like a lack of good local organic mulch options? Let us know. And otherwise, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, perennial rye in the paths. May BRB. May BRB.
Best way I found to keep the garden fresh a little longer is to freeze it. Dice up squash and root veggies, throw them on a tray in the freezer, and then when they're solid, chuck them in a bag. Same for your hardy greens like collards and kale. Rinse them, dry them, throw them in a bag, stick them in the freezer, and then just grab what you need.
Today's episode is brought to you by Farmhand. Farmers who partnered with Farmhand say they grew an average of 63% this year because it's more than software. Farmhand is your business coach and assistant, helping to sell out, save time, and grow smarter with real data from real farms, shaping websites that convert, campaigns that sell, and fulfillment systems that run smoothly. Curious what that looks like? Meet the founder, Ari, at farmhand.partners/no-till and see the same insights and support the fastest growing farms rely on every week. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. Today's episode is also brought to you by Johnny's Selected Seeds. Johnny's Selected Seeds is a proud supporter of Growers Daily. At Johnny's, they do more than sell seeds. They grow them. They trial them to see how they perform on Johnny's research farm in Maine and across the U.S. and Canada. Only the best varieties are added to their catalog and website. When you need proven varieties you can count on and detailed guidance from seedling to harvest, consider Johnny's your trusted growing partner. JohnnySeeds.com. That's JohnnySeeds.com. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener or viewer, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere the questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Tom Welsh, who asks, quote, for high tunnel walkways, would perennial ryegrass be an option? It germinates and establishes quickly and is a clumping cool season grass with limited spreading ability, end quote. All right, thanks, Tom. And definitely an interesting question here. So my first instinct is to say no. But first, I should explain that I don't love living pathways in the tunnel for the simple reason that it's a lot easier in our climate to manage mulched or even bare pathways inside of our tunnels, because those things don't work as well outside when we get 3 or 4 inches of rain at a time. Bare pathways tend to erode or grow weeds. Wood chips tend to wash away or onto the beds. I tend to cuss more when dealing with either. So to save myself some money in the swear jar, I do prefer living pathways in the field and one of the other 2 options inside of the tunnels. The other side of that coin is water. If you are maintaining living pathways in the tunnel, you will need to water them or they will just perish. And then you would also, need to be mowing them. If you have the paths bare or under mulch, you don't necessarily have to water them, but it's also okay if you do get some overhead irrigation on them. The mulch might also help keep the moisture slightly better than the living pathways, which can draw water away from plants in leaner times of moisture. Now, if you were doing overhead mostly and growing almost exclusively greens, then that moisture part is already there, and the living pathways would certainly be easier to maintain than the bare ones. Plus, you wouldn't, run the risk of contaminating the greens with wood chips, which again are only second to leaves in terms of their annoyingness in salad greens. So in that situation, I could see the case for it, or maybe just using it over the winter. Then in the spring, when it's starting to heat up and the ryegrass is wanting to go to seed, you cover it with a mulch or just let it die back for the summer. And I like what that would do for the soil over the winter. I'm not opposed to it, I guess, to using perennial ryegrass in the paths. What mower you use to maintain them will also have some say in where the mulch clippings go, so they don't, make it into your beds as well. Like we use that one that shoots them out the back, but if the beds are low at all, it will shoot them on top of the bed, so you'd have to be careful with that. In that way, I guess there is an option there, but it would just have to be well thought out. I do like perennial ryegrass as a winter cover in general, though obviously do not confuse perennial ryegrass with cereal rye. Cereal rye is the cover crop one. Perennial rye is the grass that you would definitely not want to confuse for a cover crop. For our farm, I like perennial rye between perennial rows, trees, shrubs, etc. I think it's lovely to look at. It's really nice in the winter and the spring. It's good as a weed suppressant without question. It has a lot of utility somewhere on the farm. Anyway, if you do try it in the tunnels and the pathways, just start with one path or even, a small part of the path to just see how it goes. Again, as always, start small, run trials, and then, of course, let us know what you learned. All right. Thank you again for that. And I think we'll take a quick break here before coming back and talking about one of the farming podcasts that changed the way I looked at farming, BRB. Today's episode is brought to you by High Mowing Organic Seeds. High Mowing Organic Seeds is celebrating their 30th anniversary with 47 fabulous new varieties for 2026. Highlights include downy mildew-resistant cucumbers, a poppy that looks like cotton candy, and 12 new tomato varieties. High Mowing offers more than 750 varieties of certified organic, non-GMO vegetables, flowers, herbs, and cover crops, all trialed for optimal performance in organic growing systems. High Mowing has the professional quality seeds and supportive grower reps to get you from seed to harvest. Visit highmowingseeds.com to request a catalog and use code 26NOTILL, all one word, 26NOTILL, for 10% off your order of $100 or more. That's highmowingseeds.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Marble Seed. The Marble Seed Organic Farming Conference attracts a wide range of regenerative and organic farmers for 3 days of skill development and community building. Farmer Drew Kramer said, "Going to Marble Seed was so invigorating at a time when I needed it most. I picked up tools I'm already using." The conference is the final week in February in La Crosse, Wisconsin. Early registration opens December 4th at conference.marbleseed.org. That's conference.marbleseed.org. All right, back to the show. All right, so many years ago, probably in like 2015 or so, a friend of mine asked me if I had been listening to this podcast because it was absolutely blowing his mind. Now, Hannah and I love the radio because for us at the time, it was, more accessible. And we would listen to a few podcasts at the time, like This American Life, Radio Lab, and like literally everyone else in the world, we listened to Serial. Living off grid at the time, though, we just weren't, frankly, all that plugged into new stuff. We would download episodes when we were in town because we did not have, internet or even electricity at our house. And then we listened to them, at night. And that was kind of how we rolled. So frankly, I wasn't even aware that there was such a thing as farming podcast or what they would be. But then when I was introduced to the Farmer to Farmer podcast hosted by Chris Blanchard, everything changed. Suddenly I was discovering that there were farmers doing what we were doing all over the country, all over the world. Some of them were successful at it. Some of them were not as much, but they were sharing their experiences, their tips, their tricks, their methods. And Chris, a retired farmer himself, who was just slightly older than myself now when he started this podcast, was a witty, critical interviewer who not only, added his own insight, but asked probing questions about revenue and profitability. It's hard to imagine now since this sort of sharing has become the norm, but it was at the time exceedingly new and wild to hear such intimate details about people's lives and businesses. And it really helped me and many other growers to see new and different ways of doing this farm business thing. And I mean, many people. Talk to almost any grower from that time period, and they will tell you probably with specifics which episodes changed their lives and how. For me, I think of the Dan Brisebois episode and learning about their cooperative model at Tournesol Farm. I think of the Singing Frogs Farm episode and how that really made it all click for me, that I could do no-till on scale. I mean, at the time I was kind of like doing it in our tunnels and here and there, but I didn't realize you could do this on like acres. There were just so many good ones. And in fact, at conferences and stuff, I still hear farmers reference those episodes. And if you have such a story about one of those episodes changing your farm, please drop it in the show notes. Anyway, Chris Blanchard passed away from cancer like 7 years ago, last month in 2018, and it was a significant loss. I wish Chris could know how much he changed farming with that show, how much he inspired so many growers like myself and so many of my friends. Anyway, those shows are still incredibly relevant, and I go back and listen to various episodes all the time. I will share a few in the show notes that I liked, but again, feel free to share the ones you loved as well. And if you're interested in this as a business, this growing thing, it's worth just listening to it from the beginning, though I should warn you that the sound quality is very much 2010's podcast sound quality. So yeah. Anyway, that's what's on my mind today. Very thankful for that show, and I would love to hear not only what episodes of Farmer to Farmer did that for you, but what shows in general. What podcast, what farming podcast at least changed the way you live and farm and work? Let us know, and otherwise, it's time to put Monday to bed. So good night, Moon Day. See what I did there? It was like good night, Moon, but with a day at the end. Don't forget, No-Till Growers is now officially a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out as well. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at no-tillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music and Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a hat like the one I'm wearing or a copy of the Living Soil Handbook. And if you're thinking about Christmas, I would order by the first week of December because you just never know how these things are going to go. And you can do that at no-tillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, you sign up in the month of November, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to David Bonell, you're, and Chris Main. Shouts to you all. Just every time we get a new Patreon member, I'm just so incredibly honored. So truly, thank you all. And I reward you with a really ridiculous story. So in today's story, this is about a woman named Ginger. Ginger is the governor of a small rural state in the U.S. And, Ginger's kind of like one of those tough, speaks her mind kind of folks, pretty well loved, generally speaking. And she's taking a lot of flack for going into this, going into her re-election cycle because she turned away a big manufacturer that wanted to build, giant factory in their state. And not just turning them away, but literally kicked them out of her office and told them to never come back. And her opponents seized on this, the loss of jobs and what Ginger was going to do to the economy and blah, blah, blah. But Ginger, though, was, undeterred. In their first debate against her opponents, she did what Ginger always did. She smiled calmly and spoke her mind when challenged about this, saying, "The days when manufacturing brings long-term job security and economic stability to a state is over. We will pay for their roads. We will pay for their water. We will give up our farmland, and in return, they will offer 20 temporary jobs and new yachts to their CEOs. So it wasn't a hard decision for me to kick them out of my office and out of our state. It was," says Ginger, "a pleasure." And Ginger won re-election again that fall. But of course, that's how you know this story was fiction. Thanks for watching and or listening. We'll see you tomorrow for who knows what. Maybe a Tuesday. Maybe a Tilt Tuesday. That'll be fun. Bye.